Hello, can you hear me? I think I can see someone, but I don't know if any of this works. Let's see. I'm just going to keep doing Anki cards, but if the one person that is here has a question, definitely leave it in the chat box. I'm happy to answer whatever. Can you guys hear me? Is my audio working? I'm trying to see if my stream is actually working by watching it. Okay, it looks like you can hear audio. The video quality is actually pretty decent. Okay, I can close out of this now. Yeah. Anki. I have, let's see. So I woke up at 5:45 this morning and I've been doing Anki cards. I have 272 review cards left. And then what I do is I use the add-on for Anki called Better Tags, where they organize the Zanki deck into different categories based on like boards resources. So they have the boards and beyond tags, they have the sketchy tags. And then what I do is I suspend all the cards and unsuspend them as I get to the topic. So if I watch a sketchy video on paravirus B19, then I unsuspend the paravirus B19 sketchy cards. So that's basically how I approach my Anki. Some people have been asking me to talk about how I set it up, and honestly, like I don't think I'm the best person to do that because I don't really understand how Anki works very well. It almost reminds me of coding from computer science, and I was never really great at that. So that's how I set mine up, just like the basics of it from some of my friends. Yeah, so I don't actually make my own cards. I downloaded the Zanki or the Anking deck by Reddit user Pineapples9, and they have like pre-loaded media in the Anki deck, and it can definitely take like so much time to make your own cards. I made my own for anatomy last year, and that definitely took up like a pretty large chunk of my day just trying to create those cards in the first place, let alone study them. So I think utilizing the decks that people have already made that are online for free, I think is the best way to go if you're going to try and do Anki for med school. Yeah, it's been working pretty well so far, but yeah, it does take up a lot of time. That's actually a great question. So it depends on the lecture. We have multiple different lecturers for each topic. It's not like one person is teaching the whole reproductive unit. So for some professors, like I have one professor who his lectures basically align exactly with what Pathoma teaches us, which is awesome because those are super high yield. And in that case, yes, it would cover my med school lecture. But then I have other teachers who teach us more clinically based information, which is really useful for us to have, but it's not necessarily useful for boards. So what I do in that case is I will just go through those lectures and kind of pull out the important bits of information, but I don't use Anki or any boards resources to study anything additional on top of those topics specifically. So honestly, if a question comes up and it's not covered by any of the boards resources or any of my Anki cards, I just kind of take the L on it because I don't have the time to commit. Oh, it's okay. So this is Pathoma, this book, and then when you buy the book, it comes with a subscription to online videos, and it's basically just like all the high yield pathology of the human body. So he'll go through basically everything that can go wrong and only in the most important points that are going to be on our board exams. So yeah, if you're an undergrad, like you're definitely on top of the ball. If you're like looking into all this stuff already, I wouldn't worry about it, but it's just another boards resource. Do you find yourself using Anki in undergrad at all? That's awesome. That's really nice that you get like an introduction into it in undergrad. I wish I had known, because then like the transition to any graduate level education, if you want to use Anki, is so much easier. So my school's grading system is still letter-based grades. So we have like basically like our larger courses are all A, B, C, F, and we do have one course every year that is just one exam, and the exam is pass fail. So that's the only thing that we have that's pass fail. But for the most part, we still do like a traditional grading system, just like a normal undergrad would. For everybody else that's coming in, if you guys have questions, just put them in the chat. I'll answer them periodically throughout the next like 2 hours or so. I'm just doing Anki cards, so. Yeah, I agree. I think like the learning curve for Anki is very steep. It's really confusing when you first get into it. And then once you kind of figure out how to use it, it works so well. Honestly, like my long-term retention has dramatically increased, which is awesome. It's just like a lot when you're thrown into med school and everyone's saying like, oh, do this, oh, do that, like use Anki, don't use Anki. So I definitely think it's cool that you happen to have it and use it in undergrad. I'm honestly not sure. I don't think it makes that much of a difference for me. If the question is, would I prefer a pass fail grading system? For like most people, I think everyone would kind of prefer pass fail, just because there's not that extreme stressor of having to do well, which personally I think like the application system to medical school kind of sets you up to equate your self-worth with how well you do on exams. So when you get to med school and you're not doing as well on exams anymore because the exams are A, significantly harder, and B, everyone in your class is extremely intelligent, I think that kind of sets people up for failure in med school. And so I think a pass fail system is part of the adjustments that medical schools are taking to kind of mitigate that factor. UCLA Med School has a pass fail system. 70 to 100 is passing. Yeah, I think a lot of schools are kind of moving toward that world just for the mental health of their students, because at the end of the day, if you can pass a med school exam, you're a smart person. You have the capability to go on to your clinical years and become a doctor. So for me, honestly, it doesn't really make that much difference, because personally, I kind of struggled a little bit through undergrad. I coasted in high school, and I definitely had some times in undergrad where I had some pretty bad grades. And I think because of that, I learned to be okay with the fact that I'm not always going to do well. But for the kind of person who, has a 4.0 GPA, has never gotten lower than a 90 on an exam, I think it can be really damaging to their mental health throughout med school. So I think in that case, pass fail system for across the board is generally nice. But there's still a part of me that likes seeing a number grade. I don't know if that makes sense, and I don't know if it's a better way, but that's just how I feel about it. I honestly couldn't care either way. Do you mean what would happen if I was to fail a block in med school, or what would happen if someone was to fail a block in undergrad and wanted to go to med school? My coffee's already almost gone. Okay, yeah. So it depends on the school, obviously, and it depends on the course. They're a little bit more lenient with it in the first couple exams and first couple blocks of med school, just because a lot of people are adjusting to new testing styles and things like that. If you were to fail just a single block, but you've kind of proven that you are doing well and you got like a bad grade in the beginning that outweighs how well you've done later on, I believe they will let you sit the exam again so that you don't have to retake the entire block. But if you're failing multiple classes, I believe they do let you jump back a year. So, for example, if you failed the first trimester and you failed a bunch of classes, they might ask you, like, hey, maybe it's a good idea to take a gap year, do some research at the school, and then start again next year, or, take some classes and that the school offers and maybe see like if you can boost your GPA a little bit. They're pretty lenient, to be honest, with how they treat failing in med school, just because again, you made it past the interview process, so you're clearly smart. And a lot of the time, I think it boils down to outside factors, like what's going on in your life and how you're adjusting to being in med school. So unless you're exhibiting like a repeat pattern of failing, they will typically let you. Yeah, it's like, it's not the end of the world. I know plenty of people who failed their first exam or even their first couple exams in med school, and they're pretty lenient about it. But again, that depends on the school that you go to. And some schools, I think, are better about being more understanding about that kind of thing than others. I know people who, like failed one exam in med school and then their GPA ended up not being as high as they would have liked, even though they did really well on later exams. And they had to like do a sit down board hearing on whether or not they could continue. So it just totally depends on the school that you go to. Good morning, Ash. Yeah, definitely. Failing out of med school with like the debt hanging over your head is pretty rough. I would say the debt is definitely partially a motivating factor for me to do a lot of studying and be very dedicated. Obviously, I want to do well, but at the end of the day, like your grades are not something that residency applications will look at significantly, at least not for now, while the USMLE is still graded on a number scale. I don't know if that's going to change when USMLE switches over to pass fail, but I guess we'll see. But it depends. Like, I'm very intrinsically motivated. At the same time, I know that if for some reason I fail out of med school and I have to take a gap year or something, you have to start making payments on your loans when you're out of school for 6 months. And so like, that's pretty scary because I have no money that isn't student loans. So my coffee is gone. Step 1 is becoming pass fail, not step 2. If you're unfamiliar with the way the examinations work in med school, you take step 1, the USMLE step 1, that's your first board exam, and you take that after your second year. Yep. And then step 2, which is integrated with questions and clinical skills, versus step 1 is just like base questions knowledge. Step 2 is still graded, I believe, but step 1 is switching over to pass fail the year after I take it. So I think January of 2022, maybe. I'm not exactly sure. I know that if I take it come this spring, I will still get a grade. But then after that, the classes after me are no longer getting a grade. There's another factor to that too, because I'm at a DO school. And so I have to take COMLEX, which is the DO equivalent of the USMLE. I'll end up taking both, and COMLEX is still graded. They haven't switched over to a pass fail. Yeah, that's kind of what people are thinking. They're thinking that step 2 is going to become the new step 1. And so I actually think It's not exactly the same material. Step 2 is very much more clinically motivated. And that's because you take step 2 after you've already had clinical experience in your third and potentially your fourth year, depending on when you decide to take it. So the questions are definitely more clinically based. And then there's also a session where you have to sit down and see 14 patients, like mock patients, and do 14 visits with them. And you're graded on how well you've assessed their problem and like discussed their needs and things like that. Which I actually think is better. If step 2 is going to be more heavily weighted, it's definitely like a better indicator of what kind of physician you're going to be. How's step 1 studying going for me? It's going. So I study using Anki and spaced repetition, which I know if you are familiar with med school at all, you probably are sick and tired of hearing about that. I would like to include more boards question blocks, but I just really haven't found the time in my schedule. I have an exam tomorrow. So after tomorrow, I'm really going to sit down and figure out like, okay, I want to do a 50 question block session every day until I have to take the step 1 exam, and try and figure out how to schedule that in without putting it at the end of the day and just feeling exhausted has been pretty difficult. How about the Comlex and STEP? What about them? Like, how are they different? Yeah, okay. So, like I said, Comlex is the DO exam. And so, just on like a general, there's a lot of differences between them, even though they're kind of the same exam. But just generally, the USMLE doesn't have any OMM questions on it, and it tends to be less broad information and more detailed, so more depth into like the different pathways and the pathophysiology that's going on in the condition, versus Comlex A has OMM questions on it, and then B, it's not as deep into the processes of the different pathophysiology, but it's broader topics, if that makes sense. So unfortunately, if you're a DO student and you want to take both, you kind of need to study everything broadly with a ton of depth, and then plus OMM. So there have been plenty of people who have done it successfully and gotten amazing scores, so I'm not really worried about it, but I definitely need to start picking it up. So Ash asks, did finals finish for you guys, and what block are you guys in right now? So we're on a trimester schedule, so we're not quite at finals week yet. I believe my finals week is the first week of November. To be honest, I'm not even there yet because I'm still studying for the exam that I have tomorrow. But we are currently in our reproductive, gynecologic, and urologic health block. And then we also are taking surgery and then ears, nose, throat. That's like one class this semester. And then we always have our OMM course and our primary care skills course. Did they? Yeah. So the question is, didn't they combine the residencies? And they did combine them. However, for my class, I think it's smart to continue taking both exams, just because residencies that have historically been MD resident, like quote unquote MD residencies, are still going to want to see the USMLE score because that's what they're more familiar with. And again, that changes after things are pass fail. And then same thing with like the DO residencies, they're going to be more familiar with Comlex. And I have to take Comlex in order to be able to graduate. I can't just take USMLE because I'm at a DO school, and DO schools require Comlex. So for me, just taking both of them is kind of the better option, just to make sure I cover all my bases. I have scores that everybody can understand. Yeah. I think that with anything, obviously, this large, there's going to always be a transition period. So hopefully at some point in the future, there'll be all residencies will accept USMLE or COMLEX. And I think that would be especially true if COMLEX also switches to pass-fail. So we'll see. Are DO students at a disadvantage when it comes to residencies? I don't think so, to be honest. I might be biased because I live in the Philadelphia area, and so Philadelphia is very familiar with DO students because they have the school right here. So there's a lot of DO physicians in Philly, and so residencies in Philly tend to be very DO friendly. I'm sure that in areas in the country, there are still places where they might pick an MD student preferentially over a DO student. But I think as the residencies continue to merge and people get more familiar with DOs, that's going to become less and less. But personally, I haven't really found that just because of the area that I live in. It's extremely familiar. And there are even some specialties that prefer osteopathic students, things like I wouldn't say family medicine necessarily prefers DO students, but I know that in physical medicine and rehabilitation subspecialties, they really like to have DO students just because our education is very strongly focused on the anatomy and how the anatomy applies in basically everything that you learn. So even when you're learning like all these tiny little physiologic pathways, they're always related back to the overall anatomy of the human body. So sorry, my one of my family members said, do you believe doctors should provide free healthcare to family members? You know what? With as many birthday presents as you've given me over the 23 years of my life, I think I can give you a free checkup. I don't know if you want my free checkup though. So yeah, just like to finish off that question, I don't think that there's a disadvantage when it comes to residencies for me personally, especially because of the area that I live in. Okay. Oh, hi, Mary Ellen. I'm supposed to be studying, not chatting, but I think it's interesting, like, to give you guys a chance to ask me questions live. I do this for school anyway, so it's kind of fun to just help educate people. Okay, Ash says, do you know what type of doctor you want to be, and is your school focused on primary care? It's okay, Uncle Billy. So no, I don't know what doctor I want to be. I don't think that anybody really knows exactly what they want to be until they get into the clinical setting. And I've done some pretty significant shadowing in the past, but I feel like you really need to be there and be the one taking care of patients before you can 100% decide. That being said, I do kind of have an idea of what I might or might not want to do. I know that like I find working with kids pretty difficult, so I probably don't want to go into pediatrics. And I'm also thinking probably not like the surgical route and maybe more of like the internal medicine kind of world. But again, because I haven't had a significant amount of clinical experience, I don't really know. So we'll have to see. And then the second part of that question is your school focused on primary care? I wouldn't say focused. Our school definitely sends, or at least a lot of people end up going into primary care. Part of that is the fact that it's an osteopathic school, and so osteopathic schools tend to create primary care physicians, and I don't honestly know why that is, but I think in general, all medical schools tend to have a larger portion of their students go into primary care because of the lifestyle and maybe how you don't have to do a ton of additional years after med school in order to become a practicing physician. But at the same time, there are plenty of students in from my school who go into more subspecialized categories like dermatology, radiology, radiation oncology, a lot of really tough specialties to get into. We have plenty of students who go into them. Yeah, it's really exciting to see like all the different kinds of specialties that you can match into. It's really fun. They place it like in the waiting room. They put like all the different hospital systems and specialties that the fourth year students have matched into. Okay, what classes do you recommend undergrad students taking, like ones covered in med schools? So I would say, do you want me to go through like the ones that you need to have as prerequisites for med school, or just like additional ones on top of that that I recommend? Yeah. I figured you probably already had the prereqs down if you're planning on like looking into the world of medicine at all. Um, Honestly, I would focus on those, but like you said, sometimes I think if you have a opportunity to do an anatomy class, and specifically like a dissection anatomy class, that could be really useful, especially if you start out in anatomy at school, just because studying for anatomy is so different than anything I had ever studied for before. And I took a didactic class in anatomy and physiology, but the anatomy portion was like 1 week only, and it was an online module, and it basically like didn't really encompass everything that anatomy was going to be. I feel like if you can take an anatomy and physiology course, go for it, but I would really focus on those prereqs and make sure that you do really, really well in those. And then if you have space, maybe take anatomy and physiology, maybe take sociology, because that actually can really help you on the MCAT. It's one of the things that it will improve your score potentially the most while also learning the least amount of information on the MCAT. So that's a like kind of a useful tip. If you want to increase your MCAT score by a couple points, really study the sociology. I took a lot of psych classes because I enjoyed psychology, and I found that that helped me for the MCAT, but so far it hasn't really made a huge difference for medical school, but we haven't really done a psych block yet. We're getting to neuro, so I think it'll be incorporated into neuro. So I'll let you know how that goes. But yeah, I think anatomy, physiology, sociology, and then if you're planning on doing research or anything like that, maybe take a statistics course, because that can be really helpful. Daniel asks, what did the fourth year DO students match into? The majority go into family medicine, and then like I think the second largest is internal medicine, but internal medicine doesn't include what subspecialties they go into. So you can't really tell the difference between someone in internal medicine who goes into cardiology versus like just a normal primary care internist. So those are the two most popular ones that people matched into. What does the first meeting with a pre-med advisor look like? Yeah, so honestly, I actually can't really speak to this that well because I didn't really utilize my pre-med advisor, and I had a bad experience. So definitely don't let this change like whether or not you should go to your pre-med advisor, because you absolutely should. But the first time I went to my pre-med advisor was pretty late in my undergrad career, and that's definitely on me. I should have gone right from the beginning and kind of caught up with them and made sure that I was regularly checking in with them so that I was on track. But the first time I met him, he basically told me there was no chance that I was going to get into med school with the grades that I had, and that I should take my undergrad school did like a 5-year master's program. So you do your 4-year undergrad and then you get a single year master's instead of a 2-year master's. And he kind of told me that I needed to do that in order to even think about applying to med school. And I was like, well, I can't really afford to do that. So I'm going to take a year off and work instead. And that ended up working out for me. But again, that was like my particular experience. Don't let that change whether or not you go to your pre-med advisor. Please go to your pre-med advisor and make sure that you're regularly checking up with them. Most of them are really cool and they're really supportive. I think that ideally, if I had had my first meeting with them early on in my career, they just would have helped me understand a little bit better, like what classes I need to take in undergrad in order to even think about applying to med school. And also, my brother is a computer science major, but he's also pre-med. So his pre-med advisor is really helpful for kind of working with his computer science advisor and figuring out how they're going to get all the courses for both his major and for the prerequisites for med school together. And that can be really hard to manage. So if you're an untraditional major, I would definitely highly recommend talking to your pre-med advisor regularly because they'll help you figure out what you need to fit in. Oh, yeah, there are tons of people who match into surgical specialties. Yeah, my brother does play great piano, although he hasn't been practicing lately because there's not really a place for him to practice at school. So Daniel, a lot of the students from my school actually end up going into orthopedic surgery, and that kind of reads back into one of those specialties that DO students really tend to go into, and that's because of their really fundamental understanding of anatomy. So yes, there are surgical and particularly orthopedic surgical med students who match into those residencies. Yeah, I know, it's sad, but he doesn't really have time. Okay, Ash, were those who did a master's in biomedical sciences and took the classes first year med students took prior to joining med school, were they at a huge advantage and do you recommend them? This is a great question. So at my school, there is a biomedical sciences master's and it's basically your first year of med school, just not in med school. And so I would say, yes, theoretically, they were at an advantage because they have the same professors, so they know how those professors teach, and they learned how to study for each individual professor. However, big caveat, I did just fine and sometimes even better than my biomedical sciences colleagues, and I was not in the biomedical science program. So I only recommend them if you really absolutely need them to even get into med school. And I'm of the opinion that you don't necessarily need to do them ever, but just keep in mind that those biomedical sciences programs, are super expensive. They're usually like $50,000 for 2 years. So then you're starting med school, assuming you have no undergrad debt, which is a big assumption because I definitely had undergrad debt. You're starting med school $100,000 in debt. And you've also lost 2 years of potential income earning potential as a physician. So that's, $250,000 if you're a family medicine doc for 2 years. So personally, I don't think that they're necessarily the best option. I think if you need to do them, go ahead and do them. Or if you are blessed enough that maybe your family is paying for you to go to medical school or something like that, that would definitely be maybe a reason to do it. But personally, I think that doing a gap year where I was getting clinical experience was more valuable for me than learning what to study and how to study. So it kind of depends on where you come from and what kind of student you are. Daniel, why is he doing that to himself? Computer science and pre-med. Yeah, I ask myself the same question. He loves computer science and he also loves medicine. So I don't understand it. I took one computer science course in undergrad and I was confused the entire semester. So you'd have to ask him. I don't know. Oh, also Ash, I think one other potential advantage is if there's a school that you specifically would like to go to, it might be useful to do their biomedical sciences program because they're more likely to pick someone that they're familiar with and that they know can handle the type of information. So that's another reason to potentially consider a biomedical sciences program. Naomi, I'm a sophomore in college and I really want to go pre-med, but I'm nervous that I'm starting too late. Plus, my major isn't science-based. I would definitely highly recommend going to the pre-med advisor at your school and talking about how you can work those courses into your schedule while also graduating. If your major isn't science-based and you're a sophomore, you can absolutely still go to med school if you're really passionate about it. It just might require potentially some summer courses or some heavier workloads during your regular academic semester. So definitely go to the pre-med advisor at your school, talk about it, maybe talk to your normal non-science-based advisor as well to see how you can work it into your schedule. I don't know how Rachel Southard does her live study sessions, because I feel like I just want to answer questions the whole time and I don't actually get any studying done. Oh gosh, my coaster stuck to the bottom of my cup. It's too early to study. I got up at 5:45 this morning to start studying. I have a test tomorrow though, so that is not usually how early I get up. Yeah, okay. So Just Okay asks advice on trying to get volunteer slash shadowing hours during COVID right now. It seems really difficult because we can't do much in person. Yeah, it is really difficult. Honestly, I would first and foremost prioritize your safety. You want to make sure that any volunteering or shadowing that you do during COVID is not going to expose you to any dangerous situations. And, medical school application will absolutely understand that during this time, it's not the smartest thing to do to maybe throw yourself into a hospital setting. So I would look for potentially volunteer opportunities that kind of speak more to your hobbies, something that you can do that isn't clinically based. So I'm trying to think. For example, is I signed up this weekend to go clean up a park that I hike at a lot. So, do something consistently that you can safely do socially distanced, and it doesn't necessarily have to be clinically based. Obviously, shadowing is going to be a different story. I would maybe look into potentially some outpatient opportunities just because you're not in that like intensive care hospital setting. But again, always prioritize your safety. Don't put yourself into a situation that's going to be dangerous for you, and the med school application process will understand. I'm supposed to stay up until 5:30 studying. Yeah, that's not how I roll. Ash says, I'm applying to them just in case I don't get in the first time. And I believe some of them are cheaper since they'll be fully online in the fall due to COVID. I didn't even think about that. I think that's really cool because you can do it from wherever you are and then not have to worry about like getting a new place to stay or paying class dues or anything like that. So that is true. That's a really good idea. Yeah, best of luck to you. I know the application process can be really long and stressful, so the fact that you're going through it is amazing. In your opinion, what was the hardest prereq class that you took in undergrad? Hands down, developmental biology. And it wasn't exactly a prereq. Um, it was just one of the biology courses that I took. That was the hardest course that I took in all of undergrad. But if we're talking like prerequisites, like just the base level bio, just the base level chem, I would probably say orgo. I did pretty badly in orgo. um, Part of that is because for some reason I'm so bad at 3D visualization in my brain, and that is like a skill that I will never have and a skill that you probably should try to have for orgo. And obviously, like, it's not 100% necessary. I just needed a lot of help to even get through organic chemistry, and I didn't do that great in the end, so I kind of had to make up for it with my other courses. But orgo was really difficult for me, and developmental biology was the hardest course that I took overall in undergrad. I feel like that's boring because that's what everyone says, but I guess they say it for a reason. All right, I'm gonna go to the bathroom really quick. I will be right back. Yay, I'm back. I'm thinking next time, if you guys want me to do more live streams, it might be better if I did a study with me and I stream from my phone and put it farther away from the desk and then have the chat open on my computer so that I can read and you guys can actually see like what I'm studying and doing. Because unfortunately, Anki studying is really boring. I'm just like clicking the same button over and over again. So sorry if that is not a great way to do a study with me, but we got to get those reviews done. Hi, Tofu. Whoa, there's a fly in my face. Where'd he go? Hello. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. It can be about med school or it can be about undergrad, anything. Hello, Naveen. I hope I'm saying your name right. I'm so bad at pronunciation, so please correct me if I said that wrong. Ash says, how is graduation like for those at your school? Was there an outdoor graduation ceremony? No, there wasn't an outdoor graduation ceremony. I believe they did it virtually, although I didn't attend it, so I don't know what it was like. Normally, there is not outdoor. Normally, it's a indoor ceremony at like a local, I think it's like an auditorium or something. It's not on our campus, but normally they do the in-person graduation, and we were supposed to sing at it because I'm in the a cappella group on campus. So we sing like the national anthem and we sing a goodbye song with all the fourth years. But unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. So I believe they just played like a video of us singing from last year. It's definitely, I think, bittersweet for a lot of people. Like because you've worked up so hard for this, and on the one hand you're excited to be leaving and be moving on to the next chapter of your life. On the other hand, you feel like you didn't get to celebrate properly, and so I hope that for most schools they're able to do like some kind of in-person small session or something just to say like thank you to the students, because at the end of the day, the students are what makes the school successful. So I hope that they kind of reconcile that some way, but at the same time, I understand it's not exactly safe to do so. I know that my high school, which is small, like there are definitely not a lot of students. They had the students like drive through the school and they would like stand out of their car like through their sunroof or something and drive through, and everybody would clap for them, which was kind of funny, but at least it was something. Naomi asks, on average, how many hours would you say you study each day? Great question. I just posted a video breaking down how much I study in a week and within each of those days, how much I studied each day. Although it is a little bit different because I was going to New Hampshire. So I ended up losing an entire day driving. And when I'm in New Hampshire with my fiance, I do a poor job of studying anyway. So that, that video is up if you want to watch it. I also have one from first year, but in general, I at least attempt to approach studying as if it's like a work day. So 8 hours more if I have an exam coming up is usually how much I study. So I'll study from like 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or whatever. Um, and that's just what I attempt to do. Sometimes I study way more than that. Sometimes I study less. So it just depends. Naomi says, thanks. I'm a new subscriber, so I haven't seen all your videos yet. Oh, yeah, totally fine. Don't worry about it. I just figured I would mention it if it's something that you want to see broken down day by day. Thank you so much for subscribing. And I am going to do a better one. I'm thinking I'll do a better one right before finals week so we can see like how much do I study when I have finals coming up, because I feel like that could be interesting to see, but I'm not sure if I'm going to want to put like all that pressure of studying right before finals, or all that pressure of filming my studying right before finals, because sometimes filming the actual studying happening and filming my day takes up significantly more time, so I end up studying less. But I might attempt to do it, and it might not be like the best video ever, but I'll give you like a decent representation of how much I study. So that'll probably come out in November sometime if I decide to make it. hate when I get a card wrong that I know I just don't read it slow enough and then I just get it wrong. It's so quiet. That's because we're studying. It's supposed to be a study with me. It's okay. I can play music in the background, I think. I don't know. I don't know if YouTube will copyright me if I do that. Have a good day. Thank you for coming. Naomi asks, for med school, what's the difference between primary versus secondary applications? I've heard of them, but I have no clue what it means. Yeah, so when you apply to med school, you go through AMCAS for MD students and then ACOMAS, I think, for DO students. And those kind of act very similarly to the way that the application for colleges act, where you submit like a personal statement and your transcript, and that's your primary application. Then the schools look at your primary application and decide whether or not they want to send you a secondary application, which is again online. They'll ask you more questions. So maybe they'll ask you like what your hobbies are, or they'll ask you, why are you applying to our school, which is my least favorite question. It's just to get a better sense of who you are. And it also kind of acts as like a not weeding out process. That sounds harsh, but it acts as like a primary barrier. So they decide whether or not they want to invite students back for a secondary application. And then if they like your secondary application, they'll invite you for an interview. So it's kind of like a 3-step process to getting into med school. The primary and secondary applications are online, and then the interviews right now are online because of COVID, but under normal circumstances would be in person. Ash asks, do you like online learning better than in person? What are the pros and cons for you? That's a great question. I started out first year always going to lecture and spending a lot of time on campus. And so when we went virtually last year, I thought that it was going to be like a really large disruption to the way that I studied. But I actually find that I prefer watching lectures not live because I can speed them up, and I watch YouTube videos speeded up all the time, sped up all the time, grammar. So I actually find that I have a lot more time in the day when I watch lectures afterward on like 1.5 or 2 times speed. So I would say the pros are discovering that about myself. I have much more time to use boards resources and do Anki. And then the cons are obviously like I do still wish that I could be on campus. I really miss the community of being on campus. The community at my school is really great. They're all incredibly supportive of each other. And seeing like my friends study in the library was always a really strong motivator for me. So I had a lot of trouble in the beginning learning how to study at home and learning how to be focused at home. It's a little bit better now that I'm in an apartment away from like my family who, you know, my family's working. So when they come home from work, they don't have to think about work. And I would want to spend time with them and do like fun things like play badminton. And I couldn't always do that. So being away from my family has helped me improve my productivity, and then also moving my desk outside of my bedroom has helped. But in general, just the transition from having no school environment to do all of my work at was really hard for me. So the kind of pros and cons to both. I'm glad that I learned that I was able to study efficiently using just the online resources. Hello, Elena. I'm so sorry. I'm so bad at pronunciation. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm from the US. Hello, I've always wanted to visit Korea. Unfortunately, I do not read Korean, so I can't say your name, but I would love to visit sometime. That's definitely like the next place I would like to go on the list of countries that I want to visit. Isn't it late in Korea right now? It's they're almost like 12 hours ahead of us, aren't they? I'm gonna look up what time it is in Korea. No, I haven't visited India, but that's another place that I so desperately would love to go. And hello, Rosie. Basically, I would just love to travel all over Asia. I've been to the Philippines because my mom is Filipino, and I've been to China, Cambodia, Japan. I would love to just hit all the Asian countries and experience everything. I think it would be amazing. Oh my gosh, love from Switzerland. That's so cool. It's 6:14 a.m. in California. Good for you. You're up early. Naomi, speaking of traveling, can you study abroad during pre-med? Yeah, absolutely. You definitely, again, need to work with your school and see what programs are available. My sister is also a pre-med student. Go figure, we're all pre-med. That wasn't on purpose, but she's a pre-med student and she did a study abroad program in Argentina. So there's definitely opportunities. You just kind of have to work it into your schedule and figure out when you can go and what classes you can take while you're there. Come in Switzerland, please. Again, I would love to. I traveling is like one of my that sounds so cliche, but I do really love to travel. And so definitely want to travel all over Asia. Would love to travel to some of those Northern European countries. So I'd love to go to Iceland and Switzerland and maybe Sweden, all of the above. I've been to some of the like more southeastern European countries. So I've been to the UK, I've been to Italy, I've been to Spain, but I haven't done much in the realm of travel of like Western or Northern Europe. So I'd love to go. Ash, so after the schools look at the primary application and transcripts, does that mean they don't look at grades after you get your secondary and just focus on essays? Um, so yeah, I think it's more of a overall um, consideration. So they will still continue to look at your grades and your secondary essays throughout the entire application process and like your MCAT score and things like that. So I wouldn't say they like look at your primary application and they're like, okay, this is a hard cutoff. You're good enough to get in and we'll give you a secondary. That's not really how it works. I would say like if your primary application is compelling and you seem like you would be a good fit for the school in general and you have generally good scores, then they send you the secondary application and they consider your entire application when looking at that. At least that's the way that my school has done it in the past. They call it like a holistic approach to looking at each student. And so your entire application matters. It's not like it's like, oh, if you get MCAT score of 510, you're good enough so you can get in and we won't ever look at that again. They kind of approach your like file as a whole. I'm coming here for biology. Coming here to study for biology, or you're in Switzerland to study biology? Awesome. Biology was my undergrad major. I'm doing a pretty poor job of studying, but it's okay. I am studying note cards right now. So, in med school, there's like an application that people use called Anki where you can set up the settings to do spaced repetition learning through your note cards. So every day, I would say on average, I have about 500 note cards to do first thing in the morning. And they're all just review of everything that we've learned so far. So that's what I'm doing. Yeah, Ash, I hope that answers your question. I know it's not like that everything that people usually want to hear. I think people prefer to have a more black and white answer, but it's unfortunately just that's just how it works. Thank you. I don't like my voice, so I'm glad that other people do because editing videos and listening to myself talk back is probably my least favorite thing. Thanks. Do you have any favorite medical TV shows, YouTubers? Yes. Okay. Um, definitely more strongly on the YouTubers, but I love House, and I know that House is like not realistic whatsoever. There is no hospital system in which Dr. House would be allowed to practice, but for some reason, I just love that show. I don't really watch any other medical TV shows, but my favorite YouTubers, oh, I could talk about this literally all day. Um, yeah, house. Okay, bye, Elena. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good study session. Um, I love Rachel Southard. I don't know why. I feel like she just kind of reminds me of myself because she's also a DO student. And we're the same. Are we the same year? Yeah, we're the same year. Med Kinza is another one that I really like to watch. Sophia Hahn, Kian MD. I feel like there's so many that I'm forgetting, and I'm gonna feel awful if I forget them. Um, I watch Karma Medic. Let's see. Oh, Erin Hayes. For some reason, her channel like disappeared recently and then came back. Um, America Revere, I like to watch because I feel like she was like the first person who really put a realistic account of what it's like to be in med school online. And so, like, I really respect her for that because prior to her, I think a lot of the med school content either didn't really exist or it was very scripted and not realistic and not emotional. And I'm not a super emotional person, so I don't really think my content reflects how difficult med school can be at times. At the same time, I think there are definitely some med school YouTubers who play up how difficult it is and kind of gatekeep the community and make it seem like it's impossible to get into med school and you're studying 24 hours a day and you never have time to sleep. So, America Revere is one that I really like just because I feel like her presentation of what med school life is really like is very accurate because she does show times where she goes out and enjoys herself, but at the same time she also shows the hard times when you need to study a lot. So I really like her. Everyone I mentioned. Who else? I would say those are probably the primary ones that I watch. A lot of them tend to post less and less as they get farther into their medical career. And I think that makes sense. You have significantly less time when you're doing clinicals because it gets harder to show your day when you're walking around in the hospital around people, around patients and things. But those are some of my favorites. Hi, Michelle. Oh, another funny thing is like I never watch med school YouTubers when I'm in med school. And I don't know why. Like whenever I'm not even as a student in med school, but like when I'm actively learning. So like I won't watch any med school content the entire time that I'm doing med school. And then as soon as I have a break, like a gap between trimesters. We usually get a week off. I'll binge watch all of them. And I don't know if that's just because I'm like living their life, so I don't really want to watch it, but I love all their content. I just can't bring myself to watch it while I'm actually in med school because I'm like, I already know, like, I'm living this every day, and it's which is good because it means it's a good representation of what living in med school is actually like, but something about it, I just like can't watch it while I'm in school. And then I binge watch all of them while I'm on break. Hello. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say her name. Your username is Appelsina. Appelsina. I'm so sorry. I feel like every day I just find new ways to just completely embarrass myself online. And I should be better about it because people mispronounce my name all the time. So oh, that's cool. Are you Norwegian? That's awesome. Wait, it's so cool that I have so many people here from like literally all over the world, which is so interesting. Naomi, sorry I'm asking a lot of questions. Oh my gosh, don't apologize. Answering questions is like one of my favorite things to do. I don't know why I get like a weird excitement out of it. What were your parents' reactions when you decided you wanted to go to med school? I think my mom was overly excited. That's funny. My parents are both doctors, so they didn't really have any like particular over excitement. And honestly, like people in the community were like, more towards the side of, oh, you didn't convince her to not go into medicine, because I think medicine is a little overhyped in that it's not the same as it was like 20 or 30 years ago with increasing restrictions from insurance companies and the government and things like that. Um, Working in medicine can be really tough at times because you study and you pay a lot of money for years and years and years, and compensation for physicians is only going down while workload is going up. And so a lot of people are like, why would you want to go into medicine if the workplace is not getting any better, it's getting worse. My parents were like, just, they're pretty stoic in general, so they were like, oh cool, you want to go to medicine. And they weren't the ones who ever encouraged me to go to medicine. They encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do. It just happened to be medicine that I loved. And so I will say, when I got into med school, my mom was actually visiting me. I took a gap year between senior year of college and first year of medical school. And so I was living in New Hampshire at the time, and my mom came to visit me. And we got the call that I got in while she was up there. And like you said, she was so overly excited. She was like jumping up and down, and she drank a whole bottle of champagne. And like, we helped, but it was like she finished it. And so when I got in, she was really excited. But when I decided that I wanted to do medicine, they weren't really that surprised, because I was always into like physiology and biology and things like that. Hello. Thanks so much for commenting. I see you comment on my videos all the time. It makes me really excited that you're here. So I was just wondering if you don't mind me asking, do you have Filipino blood or distant relatives who are? My mom is Filipino. She moved to the US a couple years or like several years before I was born. So I still have family in the Philippines and we go like every 3-ish years or so. It's been slowing down lately just because it's hard to get all of my family together every 3 years to go, but we try to go as much as possible. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Oh, it makes me so excited. I'll definitely have to do more of these in the future because I think it's really fun and I get to answer your guys' questions more directly than like versus collecting them on a Q&A. I definitely think next time I'm going to try and do it on my phone. So we'll see how that goes. If it doesn't work out, we can stick to this. But I think it would be better if you could see like more of my desk setup while I'm studying. And I'll try and pick times when I study for like through watching Pathoma videos and things. I'm here for the first time. This channel is awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm glad that you like it. Sometimes I feel like I'm just being silly on the internet, so I'm glad that people actually like resonate with it and think that it's interesting. That's a cute little emoji. You guys are cute. Good morning, Abby. Naomi, are there any specialties that you're super interested in? Yeah, I would say there are a couple. And I want to put a big disclaimer on this and say that I haven't gone through clinical years, so I really can't know exactly what I like. But I'm definitely interested in primary care, so either internal or family medicine. And then I'm also interested in allergy and immunology, rheumatology. I've always been interested in endocrinology and dermatology. Yeah, basically like less procedural specialties, although rheumatology can be procedural with injections and things. I really love the immune system, so that's where my interest in immunology and rheumatology come from because obviously like allergy and immunology is pretty self-explanatory, but rheumatology, you tend to manage a lot of autoimmune conditions, and I think that part of the immune system is really interesting, so that's kind of like where my interests have come from. Sunjuan, where do you live? I'm in the US. I like that little pineapple guy. Is he holding a pineapple? No, it's a thumbs up. It looks like a pineapple from far away. Sorry, I can't see anything. OMS1 next July. Congratulations! Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Is med school as hard as people say it is? That's funny. I'm going to say yes and no. It depends on like what kind of content and who you're talking to. I personally am of the opinion that people kind of gatekeep the medicine community a little bit and make it seem harder than it is. If you think that you're not going to have time for exercising or extracurriculars or seeing your friends and family, that's definitely not true. I don't study like 14 hours a day, every day. I have plenty of time for hobbies. And obviously I make YouTube videos, so I have time to do editing, which takes up a significant portion of time. At the same time, medicine is difficult. There's a reason why only, I think, less than the national average is less than 5% of people get in. And it is pretty tough. I would say the hardest thing about it is learning in the beginning how to manage the volume of information that you have received. So for me, I didn't actually feel like the content was any harder than undergrad. I went to an engineering school that had a pretty strong STEM emphasis. So if you are not familiar with like the scientific world, that might not necessarily be true for you. But I found that everything I was learning, I could manage the information and learn well. It was just learning how to manage the volume of information. People say it's like drinking out of a fire hose, which is my least favorite cliche in the whole world, but it kind of rings true. They throw a lot at you and you kind of have to learn how to approach like a 100 slide PowerPoint and boil it down to the very high yield topics. So that's going to be my answer. Kind of yes, kind of no, but definitely don't be nervous. Obviously, you're in because you are smart enough to be a medical student. Congratulations. You're going to be just fine. Yeah, absolutely. And if you ever find yourself just really feeling overwhelmed or like concerned, obviously you can reach out to me, but depending on what school you go to, I would highly recommend going to like an upperclassman because they're going through or they've gone through what you're currently going through. So I found that for me, getting advice from the upperclassmen, although overwhelming at times, was also extremely reassuring. So I would recommend doing that. Naomi, do you know why sometimes DO can't practice overseas, but MDs can? Yeah, so actually, it's really interesting, and I'm not going to get into like the ridiculous history of it right now because it goes back so far and there's so much of it. But we learned a little bit about it, and back in like the early 1900s, somebody from Europe took the concepts from American osteopathic medicine and took them over to the UK and so they created their own branch of what they call osteopathy, which is very different than osteopathic medicine and is not an actual medical degree. So I think the largest reason why sometimes DOs can't practice overseas is because of lack of education in those areas as to what an American DO is, because they're likely more familiar with what the European DO is, or not DO, what the European osteopath is. And so they recognize that the European osteopath is not a medical doctor, and they associate that with doctors in the US who have DO degrees. So I think part of the work that we need to do is to help educate other countries on what we do and how our degree is a medical degree, just like an MD is. And so we can do that, and then B, like try and I don't know if it's like up to us. I think education is the biggest factor, but it is getting better. I think they recently passed a bill in Australia where they now accept COMLEX as a board certifying physician in Australia. So now DOs can practice in Australia if they've only taken COMLEX, which is awesome. So I think it's just going to get better and better as time goes on and more education comes out. I think the internet plays a big part in that as well, because you have doctors like Dr. Mike going on and talking about osteopathic medicine and how in the US it's basically the same as an MD degree. And so other countries are more willing to accept DO physicians. Are there any specific methods for learning properly? Because I have my exam the next day and I'm really stressed out. Join the club. I have my exam tomorrow too. And if I had any specific study methods that worked the day before, I would tell you them. But in general, I would just kind of focus on like quote unquote high yield topics. For me, that's easy to say because it's pretty clear in medical school what's high yield and what's not, because I use boards resources. However, if you're studying a different subject, I would just try and look at what historically has been tested, if that's available to you. In college, we had back tests, and so I could get an idea of the teacher's testing style and things like that. And honestly, like just get a good night's sleep, have a good breakfast tomorrow morning, and do the best that you can. Wow, that's cool. I'm a med student in the Philippines. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. My mom went to medical school in the Philippines. That's awesome. I follow actually a lot of medical school, medical students who make YouTube videos from the Philippines, but I don't understand what they're saying a lot of the time because I don't speak Tagalog, unfortunately. My dad is American, so it was just easier for my mom to communicate with us in English, so I never learned Tagalog. I just know a couple words, but I still follow them and I still watch their videos because I think it's cool to see a perspective of medical school in a different country, and especially a country that I'm kind of familiar with. Yeah, of course, no problem. I think for the last 10 minutes of this live stream, because I'm going to end at 10 o'clock so that I can like really focus. But if you guys have any questions, please just put them in the chat. I'll answer them for the last 10 minutes and just talk. And I definitely think I'm going to do more of these in the future. So if you guys have any suggestions for how I should do live streams, also let me know that. I can try and make them work. I already have ideas of like putting my camera farther away so you can see more of my study space, even though it's really messy right now. Yeah, but anything else you guys recommend or any questions you have, please feel free to comment them because I'm going to go study at 10. Oh, and also any videos that you want to see, definitely let me know. I'll keep a list of them. Has there ever been a time where you had to cram a bunch of material into a few days before a med school exam, maybe even the day before? This scares me because I tend to study weeks in advance. Ash, I also tend to study weeks in advance, and so I really set up my schedule so that I don't have to cram a bunch of material a few days before. There are sometimes like today, there are a bunch of videos that I need to watch the day before, but I've already seen the information when I watched lecture and did some other note cards, so I'm not super concerned with them. There's never actually been a time in med school where I felt like I was so overwhelmed and I couldn't keep up that I was cramming in information from the whole past 2 weeks to the night before. And I think that partially has to do with like managing your schedule well and just time management in general. And that tends to be something that I kind of learned how to do in undergrad. So yeah, you definitely don't ever really need to cram a bunch of material the night before, but I do know students who do it just because that's what works for them. It's interesting to see how school is different in other countries in general. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's really cool to see, like, I didn't know that the medical degrees in other countries could be varying lengths. So I learned the other day that, like, the Australian medical degree is like built into your undergrad. Same thing with the Indian medical degree and things like that. So it's really cool to see like how other countries approach the world of medicine. Naomi, how beneficial is using an iPad for school? I personally think it's really beneficial. I honestly think it made me a better student, but if it's something that you can't afford, you do not need an iPad for school. I like it because I can keep myself organized, and I tend to have like um, I have to compartmentalize things like both in my brain and in my real life. So when I use my iPad, I don't ever use it for like watching Netflix or anything or watching YouTube videos. I always use it for school. So when I sit down and I open my iPad, I know that it's time to do work. And so that's one of the things that really helped me with the iPad. I also just like being able to take physical handwritten notes without wasting a bunch of paper. So those are two of the reasons why I really like the iPad. So if you're interested in it, I would definitely look into getting maybe like one of the more expensive, I mean, not more expensive, one of the less expensive iPads. And sometimes you can even look for refurbished options through Apple so that they're certified by Apple to be like brand new, but they're significantly less expensive. Oh, thank you so much. Have a great day or night. I don't know what time it is in India. I think it's like getting closer to the evening. So, oh, that's cool. United Arab Emirates. That's awesome. It's probably pretty late over there too, isn't it? Like evening time. Are you using a Nintendo Switch for the Anki cards for the controller? Yeah, so you can detach the Nintendo Switch controllers, and then if you take the little cover off of them, let me see if I can do it. This one likes to get stuck. There's like a Bluetooth button, so you can hold that down and connect that to your computer. And then I use an app called Enjoyable to map the controls of the controller to a specific key. So I have the forward button set as spacebar for Anki, and then the backwards button set as like the number one, because when you use Anki, the number one means that you got the question wrong. It's 5:51 p.m. Oh, that's awesome. 7:21 p.m. in India. I love it. It's so cool. It's honestly like fantastic. I think it's so interesting how the internet connects people that otherwise would never have even considered meeting or like being anywhere near each other. And so I think it's really interesting that I get to communicate with people who are like literally in a different time. I think it's so cool. Yeah, using the controller is awesome. And you don't necessarily need a Nintendo Switch controller. 3:52 in Norway, 3:52 p.m., right? Not a.m. um, you don't necessarily need a Switch controller specifically. I just already had a Nintendo Switch, so I used it because it's what I had. But Amazon sells like little single game controllers that you can do the same thing with, and they're like maybe $20 maximum, but probably less. And that's what my friends use, and they say that it works really well. So, yeah, I just like to use this because I already had it. Oh, sorry, you guys don't use PM/AM. Interesting. Oh, do you just use like 0 through 24 time, or just like you don't include it at all? 24 hours, so it's 15:53. Yeah, thank you for converting it for me. I'm not good at subtracting 12 for some reason. It should be easier. First time someone has answered me. Oh, you're welcome. I think it's really fun to interact on the live chat. And so even though it kind of like, I'm definitely more distracted while I'm studying on these, I think it's fun to like talk to people and answer questions. I'm hoping that I can like give a semi-realistic or at least improve people's expectations on what medical school is really like, because I have absolutely loved it so far. And so I always want to like share that with everyone. Nice stream. Thank you so much. It's ending soon. So if you have any questions about medical school, put them in the chat so that I can answer them before I go. Just got an email back to schedule a meeting with a pre-med advisor. Awesome. Yes, you should definitely talk to your pre-med advisor. That's really exciting. Live stream is a good start for a study session. I think so too. Although, like I said, I tend to get distracted because I love talking to people and I talk a lot. So I don't do a great job of studying, but I think next time I'll be able to like potentially hide the chat window and then do a more structured question and answer at the beginning and the end. When I like do the live stream on my phone instead of my computer. So we'll see if that works out next time. But if not, it's okay because I can make time to like chat and things. Close the chat during studies. I can close it? Can I close it? Pop out chat. That's a pop out. I'm very new at this, so I don't know how. Oh, I can open up just the participants potentially and just look at the participants screen instead of the chat. So maybe I'll do that next time. Yeah, I definitely need to like learn how to use these services better. I'm very new to everything and I'm new to YouTube, so I hope you guys enjoy even though I basically don't know what I'm doing. Suha, I'm having an exam. I felt I needed a partner, and that's why I'm here. Awesome. I'm so sorry, but I'm going to be leaving in like 2 minutes or so. But best of luck on your exam, and I hope you have a great study day. I have an exam tomorrow too, so that's why I'm studying this morning. So many people with exams. Good luck to all of you. Oh, that's so sweet. Yes, we're going to crush them. Chris, hi. How did/do you review content? For example, biology, which has so much content. Yeah, so right now, I'm using note cards for pretty much everything, and I have them set up so that they are like spaced repetition so that I'm reviewing old information constantly. But I know that that doesn't always work for undergrad classes because you only really need to know the stuff for that single class. So I used a lot of Quizlet when I was an undergrad. I also wrote a lot of my own practice exams. So I would have like a running document for the exam, and anytime we had a lecture, I would put like two practice questions from the lecture onto exam document, and then I would take that before the exam to see how well my studying was going and what topics I could brush up on. So you're right, biology has like a ridiculous amount of just straight memorization content. So note cards and practice questions would be my best advice. Okay, guys, it's 10 o'clock. So if you have any last minute questions, put them in the chat. I'll leave it open for another couple minutes and then I'm going to have to go study. So thank you guys so much for joining me. And like I said, if you have any recommendations, put them also in the chat so I can keep them in mind for next time. Miriam, I'm going to leave because I have an exam, so I'll see you in the next live. Oh, thank you so much. This was also my first time doing a live stream. So good luck. Best of luck on your exam. Have fun. Oh, thank you guys so much. You're so sweet. Oh, I'm so excited. Yeah, I'll definitely do more of these in the future because they're so fun. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Goodbye.